can experience and enjoy that you deserve. I am your host, Dr. Mike Matthews.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Athletic Potential Podcast, episode 26. And today we've got another great podcast with a case. Like all of our other podcasts, we talk about a case, typically the last patient I treated prior to the recording of this episode. And then also we discuss or have questions from our audience and we answer those questions. And we're excited to be able to do that. We've just hit episode 26, 25 last time. It was a great episode. And we'll just keep going and keep answering your questions. And so let's jump right in. So our today's case, as previously mentioned, we're going to talk a little bit about golfer's elbow. Now, this case was a 35-year-old male who had just recently increased his activity, mainly playing pickleball. And he had noticed that he was starting to have pain. Well, I guess it wasn't just pickleball, but he was also mountain biking and doing other things. But pickleball was predominantly the thing that he had changed the most recently. And he came to me with a complaint of pain in the right elbow, mainly on the inside of the elbow. And he said that most of his pain was there when he was trying to perform a forehand hit with a racket and pickleball, and also when he was mountain biking, any type of gripping the handlebars and then having to really stress and move the handlebars around. He noticed some increase in pain, and that the pain had not dissipated at all for quite some time. So he'd been dealing with it for the better part of about 2 months before he came to me. We diagnosed this pretty quickly. We knew there wasn't a ligament issue. He didn't have pain in the right location, had no mechanism of injury, no fall, nothing that would indicate that, nothing in the past. We tested this muscles specifically of the elbow, mainly some grip testing in very specific positions, all indicated that he had golfer's elbow. Golfer's elbow is also known as medial epicondylitis. Epicondyle is just the area of the bone. That's this epicondyles on the inside of the elbow. Itis is inflammation or irritation of that region. Now, in his case, he'd had it for more than a few months, and it had not improved, indicating that anything that's gone that long is no longer what we consider an acute problem, something that's just aggravated. A traditional itis is something that's only kind of days old. It's really hot. It's really nasty. It hurts just even look at it sometimes. And it has been around for months. He's been dealing with it. And so we've kind of gone out of the traditional epicondylitis or itis phase, and now into more of this. We're thinking that the tissue itself was just not as good as it normally could be. I hate to use the word degenerative, but it's just not very good tissue because it didn't ever heal strong enough. In his case, he did stop for a period of time, right around 3 weeks. The pain dissipated and he returned to activity. He had pain almost immediately, and so he never really took time out after that. And so what we're thinking is that he probably just aggravated it over and over and over again, and to the point where he's now having substantial pain, and that tissue never had a chance to heal. So I prescribed him a very specific regimen of activity. I told him not to stop playing pickleball, not to stop mountain biking, but to decrease his activity there by at least 25%, and to see if his pain would dissipate just with that. It did not, and so we ended up dissipating and told him, okay, you got to cut it in half. So he had 50% reduction in activity, and his pain went away with activity. He was just doing too much. Now, the problem was I told him, look, we're going to make it feel better with you in the next 4 to 5 days. However, you're not going to be able to participate in everything you want to be able to do. He'd normally ride his mountain bike 4 to 5 times a week. He'd play pickleball 3 to 4 times a week. At this point, he rode his mountain bike twice a week, and he played pickleball twice a week. And he was not happy about it. So we had to convince him that it was okay. So I gave him about 10 days of that protocol. Pain levels were down with normal activity. He was still able to play without pain, which was fantastic, but not at the levels that he wanted. And at this point, we introduced some treatment almost immediately. One of the main things we introduced immediately, the fact that the tissue is not very good tissue. We introduced dry needling with electrical stimulation to try and ramp up the body's healing response to the area. And I think that was, to be honest, one of the key things that got him better was that dry needling. But not only just the dry needling, but also the 50% reduction in activity, but not to overlook the fact that we were doing dry needling and still having him participate in his sports, but at a lower level. So we were stressing the tissue while it was still trying to turn over with this new introduction of trauma, irritation, whatever you want to call it, healing through the dry needling. We wanted him to continue to play a little bit so that the body would have those normal stresses on it, so the body would heal in the right ways. And then what we did after that was he maintained the dry needling treatments twice a week, and we slowly progressed him return to his normal activities. I'll be honest, I gave him no exercises to do. All I told him to do was to perform, I call them stretches. They're not even really stretches. They're essentially isometric positioning activities into wrist extension. I had him basically put his hands, he basically got on all fours, and he put his wrists in maximum extension. What does this look like? It looks like you're trying to push your body over the top of your wrists. And I told him when he's in that position to take his fingers and to grip into what he was pushing on. And I told him more often than not, I think it works better if you're on carpet, not on a bed, it's too soft. Something on like a harder surface, but has a little bit of give to it. Carpet's usually the best. And I told him I want him to lean into it and just grip lightly to the point where he doesn't feel any pain, but he feels some strain in that area. He did that. That was daily. I did it morning and night. He did, I believe, 3 sets of 1 minute with about a 10 to 15 second rest in between, and then maintained his activity level outside of those exercises, including a gradual regression from twice a week of both activities of mountain biking and pickleball to then 3 times a week with both, then to 4 times a week with both. And he stayed there because he felt good, and he was a little worried about getting back to 1 more time a week mountain biking. And I told him, don't hold back, considering that you have an off-season mountain biking coming up in our area here. Really tough to mountain bike in feet of snow. There you can, but he's more of a skier, so we knew he'd switch sports and probably wouldn't have as big of an issue with this after that. So I told him to go ahead and go back into mountain biking. About 6 treatments of dry needling, and about, I would say, a total time period of about 20 days. Just under 3 weeks, and his pain had totally remitted, and he at this time 100%. He can do everything he wants to do. He's actually introduced rock climbing, so and he has no problems. So kind of fun when you see those treatments work like that. I think the main thing that we saw with him and those people with golfer's elbow is that the key is getting the tissue, depending on how long it's been there, getting the muscles, getting that tendon to start the healing process up again. I don't know if it ever stops, but the idea is to get it to start up again and ramp up, but do so with a reduction in activity, but not a full reduction. A reduction to the point where it's no longer causing damage or problems, more irritation, okay? But enough that you're stressing the tissues to change in the direction that we want them to. And in his case, we gave him kind of an isometric, contracting muscles in a lengthened position. And the reason why we did that is because that was the position he felt like he couldn't get into without it starting to produce pain. And once his pain levels were gone and we got him into those positions and there was no more pain, we said, okay, you're gonna contract your muscles in that position. And that's what we did, and it seemed to work. So in his case, it's just about, in any golfer's elbow, it's all about making sure that you know the stage of the is that tissue trying to heal? Is it really mad and aggravated? Is it just beat up? Does it need a rest? Does it need to be pushed? All those things were things we had to answer before we knew what we were going to do. And once we answered it, we were able to introduce some healing response through the dry needling. Oh, one other thing that we had him stop doing, because he was doing it almost daily, and everything confounded the results, but he was icing every day. And he said that that's the only thing that kept his pain down. But then when I asked him, I said, well, are you heating it? He goes, well, I don't want to heat it because that's just going to make it more aggravated, because it's a tendonitis. It's already hot. It's already irritated. That's just going to be irritated more. And I convinced him that icing wasn't probably the best thing for him to do, and then told him to heat. I said, if it makes you worse, then you can go back to what you were doing before. He stopped icing. He started heating. No problems. So maybe that helped. If anything, it just didn't slow down the healing process as ice can do sometimes. So anyways, fun case, fun to see him get better like that. And something that golfer's elbow is pretty common. That medial epicondylitis is pretty common. And I think one of the reasons we don't see great treatment for that is because there are different types of it. In his case, it was very specific, right? We need to treat it very specifically unless we identify really what really is the problem, then and how it became in that way. I just wonder if we're going to really ever get a solution for our clients that will be effective. And so All right, that is our case. And we are going to switch gears to our questions now. So we take questions from our audience. I had this question not too long ago about are all of these questions written in? Is it just a few? Those type of things. And I can tell you right now that we have a lot of questions written in, and then we have questions that I get on a daily basis. Those times I'll say like, hey, that's a great question for my podcast. You mind if I talk about it? And they say, well, yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to hear your answer, on the podcast about it. So some of these questions are from in-person me just interacting with people, not here at necessarily Athletic Potential, but maybe out and about, that I feel like are great questions. So I had somebody say, it's like, man, some of your questions seem a little handpicked. And I said, yeah, they are, because I get asked questions all day long. It's kind of my job is to provide good information to the most people. And some of these questions are just great questions to ask. And so I wanted to bring those answers to the podcast. I didn't want it to be limited to only those people that were there in the room, and the fact that nobody else gets to hear it because you weren't here. So anyways, there you go. So first question comes from Ashley, and she says, as a coach, we have been implementing medicine ball throwing with our athletes and have seen it transfer to improvements on the field. What rotational exercises do you recommend for your athletes? So, and we're talking about med ball throws. We use, okay. So I don't know the age of your athletes, Ashley, but I can tell you right now that there's 2 med ball variations that we use with almost everybody. The first is a scoop toss. So think the med ball starts at your back hip. You're going to throw it from right to left. You're going to start it on your right hip, and then you essentially scoop the ball behind your hands, keeping your hands below your waist, not the whole time, but you know what I mean. And they kind of scoop the ball in a big tossing motion at the wall or whatever it is you're throwing at. And so that's a scoop toss. And then what we do is we vary leg position, load and unload, how fast they move. So we use scoop toss variations quite extensively. And I like to start with scoop toss variations with our athletes, youth athletes, because it seems easier. They just kind of get it already. And the other thing is it teaches them to stay upright and generate more of that rotation through the thoracic spine than it does if we put a weight up here, if they're not used to it, they seem to require a little bit more coaching for us to be able to get them to do it right. So we start with scoop toss and we teach them to get into their hips. Think hinging to start, and then we rotate out of it. So scoop toss is one of our variations. Then we use a shot put. Shot puts, instead of being at your hip, now it's going to be up top. Think a chest pass in basketball, but more of a rotational version of that. The hand is behind the ball, elbows straight behind, and you're pushing through the ball with a rotational throw. And that's a shot put variation. And again, we modify leg position, loading patterns, distances, speed. They have to, a lot of times we'll have a partner throw it to them, and they have to catch and then throw. So they have to react. They have to. We've done grounders, essentially balls on the ground. They approach the ball like a grounder, pick it up, and throw rotational shot put or a rotational scoop. All of those things that we incorporate, and you can get really creative with these. There's a ton of different variations. Heavily influenced on the med ball throwing side from Eric Cressy. He's got some really good stuff out there on med ball throws. And one of the things that he said in the past was he really likes to see his guys get athletic with these things. He wants to make them look good, right? And so, that's why you put different variations. You make them react. You make sure they have to get their feet in the right positions and those type of things. But in the beginning, these athletes have to show the basic, fundamentals of the rotational throw. So those are the 2 variations that we've used. Ashley, as a side note, I can tell you right now, there's something new that we're implementing, and it's nothing new. I shouldn't say it's new. It's just something that we're more heavily emphasizing in our athletes. And this has been done elsewhere, and you may already be aware of it, but this is something that I think a lot of people miss. Is they look at rotational throws and they think, oh yeah, we got to work these rotational throws. Most of these throws are not slow, right? If you look at them, you're moving fast. You're trying to deliver the ball quickly into a wall or into the ground. We didn't even talk about chops, by the way. We do chops all the time. But the idea is that you're trying to move these things quickly. There's a certain amount of strength that needs to be had before we can really do that effectively. Most of our youth athletes require a little bit more strength, and don't overdo this one. So like when we talk about strength, we talk about squat and hinging and pushing and pulling, those type of things. But one of the things that we're incorporating more now, specifically with our intermediate, so I think teenage, high school, and then definitely if they don't have it, collegiate and professional athletes, is rotational strength. And I say rotational strength, not rotational power. We're not trying to move quickly, not plyometrics. We're not trying to move quickly with a response. We're teaching them to move deliberately against a higher resistance, a higher forces through rotations. And when we think rotation here, we're thinking thoracic spine rotation, and we're thinking lumbar spine. I used to say lumbar spine. It's still thoracic spine rotation, but it's essentially rotation with the upper body, the upper half rotation being still, and then our lower half being still. And we do that using resistance bands wrapped up around our shoulders. There's a lot of different implements you can use. You can Google this kind of stuff. There's a lot of stuff out there. We've incorporated this more and more and more. And what we've noticed is that there are athletes' ability to rotate quickly has dramatically improved. They just look more athletic, and they get it more, and their forces are more. We've been also messing around with measuring forces of these throws with med balls. You can measure with distance. That stuff works. You know what I mean? Like we give them a ceiling, can't throw it higher than this, you got to throw as far as you can. Like that's one way to measure force, right? You don't get a number, but you get a distance out of it. There's some other things that we're working with and incorporating that may be pretty effective in trying to give them feedback of making sure that each repetition is high quality. But the idea is that we've noticed that our distances are better, our throws are more crisp. They just look more athletic when we've been now incorporating this more rotational strength activities. And so if you can go to my YouTube channel, you'll see like upper half rotation, lower half rotation. You'll see some tall kneeling, thoracic rotation, isometrics. Those are the kind of things that we're incorporating now. And just go to the YouTube, search those things, and what you'll find those. I highly suggest, I don't know what age group you're working with, or if you say you're a coach. I don't even know if you're a strength coach, but the idea is, look, Ashley, whatever it is, I highly encourage you to start using these. This is not something that we used heavily in the past, and I kind of look back and go, shoot, we probably should. We probably should have been doing this a while ago, which I consider good because that means that we're looking at our programming and being like, okay, we got to get better. And the other thing, it kind of feels bad, right? Because then we could have been doing this a lot longer and probably seen some more improvements in our athletes. So rotational strength. Think rotational strength. Keep going with your med ball throws. Those are fantastic. Definitely need to train them. It's not something that happens a lot. Didn't happen a lot in the past. We've seen it way more popularized lately. I definitely want you to use them. I think they're highly effective, but consider using more rotational strength type activities, and I think you'll see some positive improvements with your athletes. Okay, question 2 from Adam. He says, do you recommend barbells, kettlebells, or dumbbells for your youth athletes during training? And a mentor of mine, Dan John, you hear me mention his name almost in every podcast, it feels like. We talk about either or questions, and he hates them. I don't necessarily hate them, but I can tell you right now that the answer is I use all of them with our youth athletes, but I will tell you that I use certain amounts of them more frequently than others. And so let me get into that just a little bit. Sorry, I had to take a drink. So Adam, we definitely use kettlebells and we definitely use dumbbells with our youth training athletes. I can tell you this right now. I had a youth group. I've been training 2 youth groups right now, 14U youth group and a 12U youth group. The 12U has not touched a barbell yet. I shouldn't say that. They definitely have touched barbells, but only to take them out of the racks so that we can use the racks. They take the barbells, they put them on the ground, and we don't use them after that. So the 12U guys, I'm not using barbells with right now. And it's not that I don't think they could handle it or I don't think they'd see benefit from it. I just look at it from the standpoint, now remember, this is 12U baseball and 14U baseball, so this is specific. If we're talking to other athletes, okay, I'll be honest, if I had if I had some football athletes that were the same age, 14U, 12U, I'd be putting some barbells with them. The barbell is a highly effective tool at developing strength. Absolutely is. It's a great tool. I use a barbell in my own training. I'm not against barbells. I think they're fantastic. What I have found in the youth for baseball purposes is that, one, all of these guys, our 14U guys, they're all bench pressing because, I hate to say this because I'll probably put myself out on a limb, I don't mean to offend anybody, but they're 14. They're 14-year-old boys that just, I'm going to bench, and they want to bench, and then they bench. So that being said, actually, the 14-year-olds I've shown how to bench press a little bit. So they're just not terrible at it when they are going to go do it all on their own. And but I don't program it. I don't typically program it. So the one reason that's one reason they're already bench pressing. They're doing it because it's fun. They enjoy it, which I encourage. I encourage working out. I encourage enjoyment in the gym. But I always tell those guys, like, look, you guys got to show me that you can do this correctly. You guys, and I'll be honest, of our 14U group, I've got, let's round up. I probably have like 30, maybe 35. Half can't even do a correct push-up. They really struggle. At least they could when we first started. And I'd say that 3/4 of our group right now have a pretty good push-up. But the idea is, I don't really want them doing bench pressing if they can't even control their own body weight and have body sense enough to be able to push. And so that's one reason I don't use barbells as much, but I definitely use barbells in our athletes. But I don't use a lot of barbells with baseball players, period. So in our youth athletes, depending on the sport, I definitely would use barbells. But as of right now, in the fact that I train a lot of baseball players, softball players, throwers, I don't use a lot of barbells. If I was more into track and field, or if I had more track and field athletes, which I definitely do, I probably would be using more barbells. I think it's a highly effective tool for them. And it's a highly effective tool for everybody, but I just have noticed in baseball players specifically, we can get very similar gains without the potential problems of using barbells. And so of the three that you mentioned, kettlebells, dumbbells, and barbells are used quite frequently the least amount. And we use a heavy amount of dumbbells and kettlebells. And I'll be honest, if I had more kettlebells, I would use more kettlebells more often. We use dumbbells all the time. We use kettlebells all the time. I really enjoy kettlebell training, not only personally, but for our athletes. I think it has tremendous benefits for the baseball players in regards to all sorts of aspects of their fitness and their ability to become better baseball players. So, interesting way to answer this, Adam. I'm going to kind of go out on a limb a little bit. So, I had someone else in office here ask me a question a little bit similar, but basically it was along the lines of, hey, what equipment do I need to buy my sons? He had 2 sons. What equipment do I need to buy my sons for home use? Because that's where they're going to work out. What should I buy? Should I buy kettlebells, barbells, dumbbells? Those kind of things. And what I told him was, I told him, look, you need to buy three different kettlebells. Now his sons are, if I remember right, 12 and 15. So I said, you need to buy 3 different kettlebells. You need, and we're going to use pounds, okay? You can buy them in kilograms and all that kind of stuff. But if I hesitate, it's because I'm trying to convert, right? So you need a 25-pound kettlebell. You need a 45-pound kettlebell, and you need a 55-pound kettlebell. So that's 12, 20, and 24 kilos. And I said your 12-year-old is going to use that 25 pretty much exclusively. Any lighter than that 12 kilogram, I just kind of, at that point, you can use a 15-pound kettlebell, you can use a 10-pound kettlebell. I think they're great. I look at it and go, I feel like we get similar benefits from dumbbells too at that point. So if you're trying to familiarize somebody with kettlebells, then go buy those lighter kettlebells. I mean, I have, let's see, at home I have a 5, 10, 15, 25, 45, 55. I have doubles of the 45s and 55s. And I would definitely say that the 5, 10, and 15 kettlebell get used. And I have my kids use them. So, and I have a 7 and 12-year-old or 11-year-old. So, kettlebells first, barbells second. Kettlebells first, dumbbells second, barbells third. That'd be the order I'd probably put them in. If we're only talking about these 3 implements, there's a million pieces of equipment that I'd recommend. Tough question to answer. But I would say if you're asking, do we use all 3? Yes. Barbells are used the least. Dumbbells and kettlebells are used the most. So, yeah, we definitely use them all. And I want them to use them all excuse me, because I really want our athletes to know how to use everything. They're going to go into weight room settings where we're not around, they're not around us at Athletic Potential, they may be at home, they may have limited equipment, and I want them to be able in the future to be able to use whatever they have effectively, and not that have it just be totally foreign to them. Okay, so that's something that I would also suggest is we try to introduce different movements, different implements in the gym so that they become very familiar with them, so they become more comfortable with them, and then thus allows them to be able to work out really with whatever they have in the future. So Adam, great question. It's definitely a question I get quite a bit, and those that are here at Athletic Potential and the parents will come talk to me too. They say, it looks like we need to get a bunch of dumbbells, and I always tell them, like, well, that's because I have 30 guys in here and I only have 12 kettlebells. If I had 30 kettlebells of differing weights, I probably would use the kettlebells, but I have 12, and they're just a little too heavy for the 12-year group. So anyways, so Adam, I hope that answers your question. Reach out if it doesn't. I'm happy to answer more specifically to there. So, all right, and that is it for our questions. I appreciate everybody tuning into the podcast and asking your questions. We definitely want to get more questions we get, the better. We can get information out. Again, the whole purpose of this podcast is really just to provide information for those out there that may have questions, that may be trying to understand what it is that they need to do to go from where they're at their point A and get to point B, whatever that is, and to provide good information about maybe some injury things, injury aspects that are out there, just home treatments, recovery methods, any of those things. That's what this podcast is for, is just to help educate and bring good knowledge to the forefront. I can tell you right now, we've got future podcast episodes that are going to be coming up that are going to go a little bit more in deep dive on some very popular subjects. I put my geek glasses on those, and we dive deep into some research, but I try to give you some very almost like a guideline, research-backed, evidence-based guidelines on some very common things that are going on, and so, or that people face on a daily basis. And so, look for those in the upcoming episodes. To be honest, if I could tell you when they were going to be coming out, I would, but I can't because I'm not sure. And so, just look for those in the future. And then, if you do have questions, please just reach out to the podcast and get a hold of us and submit your question, and we'll answer any and all questions we get. Again, thank everybody for tuning in, and until next time, thanks.